Daniel.
Thank you for having me, Alethea. It's so good to be here.
It's great to have you here. And you all, this is what I coined personally as the guru of connectors. He is such a connector's connector. He knows how to meet and network and connect, but it's deeper than just a meet and greet or a virtual coffee. It's so deeper than that. And Daniel is going to share with us his journey of how he became who he is. But first, Daniel, before we do that, I always like to have a fun, lighthearted icebreaker
Sure.
question. Okay,
Uh,
this is my question for you. Daniel, do you enjoy horror movies or action movies? And if so, which movie in particular out of one of those genres
oh,
do you absolutely love?
okay. Interesting. Action over horror. Horror stuff.
Okay.
I process visually. Those stuff will give me nightmares. I have to leave.
Oh,
I will go get popcorn during the trailers in the movie theater when the horror movie ad comes on because it's always one. There's always one in there,
mhm.
and I just go. That's when I leave because
Yep.
it'll mess me up for good. Action. Wow. Is there one that stands out?
Hmm.
There have been a number of good movies over the years. Man, that's hard to say. Uh, I like ones that tell a real story,
Mm.
right? I think there's a lot of action in the superhero, right? But the stuff that's heavy on the CGI, right? If you can create a hero or villain and give them some superpower, to me that's kind of cheating, kind of like time travel, right? We can't resolve this thing, so we'll introduce time travel. That'll fix it, right? That'll
Yeah.
explain it all. To and not to say that I have no feelings at all about Superman or Batman, right? For those of us that grew up on that stuff,
Right.
but the notion that a trick or a gimmick, is tied in, right? Because this the super villain always has one weak spot that just happens to coincide with the superhero's power, right? You're like, oh,
Hmm.
come on, people, right? But I,
Hmm.
I like I like something that tells a story. James Bond stuff has stuck with me for a long
Oh,
time. I mean, there's
yeah.
there's a bit of fantasticalness in a lot of those, but
Mhm.
the cute little gadgets. Uh, oh brother, where art thou? Right, it's not
Oh,
really an
yes.
action movie, but
Hmm.
there's action through it, right? There's there's
Yeah.
there's there's interesting stuff. It just seems really human, right, to me.
Wow. Wow.
More
Yeah.
so than a superhero movie. Something that feels relatable, I think, would be part
Hmm.
of it. So.
And I think James Bond is a good comparison because if anyone watching or listening has ever seen any of the James Bond movies, although James Bond is that central character, all of the plots are so different. And I enjoy all of the obstacle courses, or I think action um what was his name? Oh my gosh.
Jason Bourne?
Indiana Jones.
Oh,
Indiana
yes, there we go.
Jones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Indiana Jones. At first, I was gonna say Crocodile Dundee. I was like, no, I'm talking about
That
Indiana Jones.
that that,
But
that was a funny
Indiana
movie, but
Jones, Jason Bourne also. But I love the
it's just
fact,
so hyper violent. Jason Bourne is just,
yeah, yeah,
people killing each
it
other
really
in
is.
very, very ugly ways over and over again.
Yeah, and I'm actually glad that you said action, and it is because you take action in all that you do without compromising your integrity, without being someone who's fake and phony. You're so authentic and you show up for people in their lives to make these meaningful connections, which leads me to ask you this. If you could describe to someone, say if you stepped outside of yourself and someone was to ask you, tell me a bit about this Daniel Andrews. Who exactly is he? How would you answer them?
Wow. Describing yourself can be difficult, I think, in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, right? Which is why we have coaches, right? Which is why we build networks and let other people introduce us. Um, uh, I would say that I'm not afraid of controversy.
Mm,
Um, I I'm also not afraid of being wrong. If you've got data, you know, that can persuade me otherwise, I'll look at it, right? I'm not married to any position, um, except the ones that I have data for, right? Because there's a lot of things that people think should work and they don't. And
Mhm.
so I'm always leery of other people's self-appointed titles, which is why mine on LinkedIn says chief instigator.
Mhm.
And
It
I
does.
don't know if I'm actually bragging about anything there, right? So I could go with that one because I don't mind telling people, yeah, you think that would work. It's actually a terrible idea and it's not going to get you there. And they're always like, what? I'm like, let's think it all the way through. And, in defense of contrarian thinking, in defense of the world doesn't work the way you think it would or should. In 2001, they gave a Nobel Prize in economics to a psychologist, not even an economist, who
Mhm.
proved that people don't act the way you think they would act.
Mhm.
And particularly around economic incentives, it actually interferes with frequently what you think you want, from people. So, eh, describing myself, somebody who's not afraid to change his mind, somebody who's not afraid to insist that I have data that shows my thinking is right when I know I'm right. You
Mhm.
know, um,
Mhm.
uh, excited, maybe overexcited to help other people. In my first career, my first wife said, you're a little over. She said you take it too personally. When you're sales reps, because I was managing a sales team. When they fail, and I said, but that's because I take it personally when they win. Right.
Mm.
I either have to care or I can't, or I don't care. Right. I can't pick and choose when I'm going to care.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, I
and
understand.
and so I do get kind of worked up about what I know works, and bang my head against the wall. When I see people going a route that's not going to take them where they want to go, I'm
Mm.
like, but it's not working, and it hasn't been working for years, and yet you think more of that is going to somehow be the breakthrough. So
Mm. And for that, in terms of you having that title, and yes, I've noticed it on LinkedIn as chief instigator, and I chuckled the first time that I saw it, but I said it's comical, but he's also serious about it. And so this leads me to just wondering about the man you are now. Take us back to those early beginnings when you were a boy, a teenager, and a young man. Daniel, did you always have this entrepreneurial spirit in you? And if so, share with us a bit about your childhood and some traits that perhaps have led you to even be who you are now.
That's a good question, and I've fortunately had a few chances to work through some of this with coaches and therapists, but also had
Oh,
a
oh,
few chances to discuss this recently as well. So it's I can clarify.
okay.
I've been self-employed officially since 1988. So what are we, 37 years?
Mm.
51 years if you start with the lemonade stand in first grade, and it wasn't a jump from first grade to
Daniel,
1988.
I don't mean to cut you off, but when you said 37 years in 1988, I was like, no, I don't think it's been that long. Yes, it has. It was 37 years ago. OMG.
I know, I
I'm
know.
sorry. I didn't mean
No,
to
it's
do.
fine.
Yeah,
And
I
you
was
might
like,
edit this, but my wife sent me a reel the other day. This wife and husband are unhanging the Christmas tree. She goes, "Oh, look at this. This was from our first." She said, "This is the one my mom gave us in 1985. It's 20 years old." And he goes,
no.
"No, it's 40
Anyway,
years old." And then it cuts back to her, and she's got on this gray
that's so.
wig, and
Oh,
eyeglasses.
gosh.
What did you just say? Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry
anyhow,
about that. I was
no,
just
no,
like,
no, I get
wow.
it. Right.
Okay,
Uh,
go
so
ahead.
50,
Okay.
51 years if you start with the lemonade stand in first grade. And it wasn't a jump from first grade to 1988. It was the lemonade stand to selling greeting cards door to door to selling
Mm,
M&Ms to my classmates when I found out anybody with a checkbook could buy M&Ms at wholesale, right? To selling programs at the University of South Carolina football games on weekends for 8 years,
mhm,
and the notion that I could be rewarded based on my effort, right? A friend of mine, when he chose to become self-employed, his friend said he had left a government job and his friend had stayed there. And his friend said, how can you stand to work not knowing how much you'll get paid? And he said, how can you stand to work knowing how much they're going to pay you.
Oh, wow. Yes,
Right? It's a
sir.
mindset. So the idea that I could be rewarded based on my success, which comes from, and I won't turn this into a whole therapy session in front of your audience, but my father was a fighter pilot. And if you watch Top Gun, not the second movie where everybody's a good guy, but the first movie where
Yes.
everybody was a jerk, there was a good guy
Mm-hmm.
jerk and a bad guy jerk, but they were both
Mm-hmm.
jerks. And fighter pilot or fighter pilot, teasing, putting people down, being dismissive, that's one thing, right? But when the nicest compliment one man can give another is you don't suck that bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Man to man, that's one thing. Father to son, that's not a good thing at all.
Uh-huh.
So I think a large part of my desire to be self-employed, literally the bulk of my lifetime, comes from the idea that I get to pick or set my own goalpost, and then I know what it takes to hit there. No one's
Yeah.
going to move the goalpost on me.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to say, sure, Dan, that was all A's and one B, but why did you get a B? How come you didn't get all A's completely? Right? Nobody's going to move the goalpost on me. And I get to pick the community. I get to pick the environment. I get to pick the company that I'm going to represent. And I get to set a standard for what I think success is. And then I get to knock that out. Right. Nobody's going to second guess me on the way. So I think part of it comes, and by the way, my father and I became quite close later on. He apologized for some of his mistakes in parenting.
Uh-huh.
Over the years, I come to learn his parenting was a lot like mine, so I
Mm-hmm.
can't hold that against him. But I think some of my commitment to entrepreneurship comes from some damage. Now, has God blessed that and turned it into a good thing in my life? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm still working with a coach on not letting the ghost of my father run my business still
Mm-hmm.
today. So
Yeah, but
there's
but
that.
but even admitting that, I think it's so important that with every highly successful entrepreneur that I have encountered, there has
Hmm.
been a story of a part of brokenness or trauma or some
Hmm.
challenge or pain point that they've had
Yeah,
to work through. And it leads me to what you do now in terms of really being intentional about the connections that you make. So if you could share in your own words exactly what you do at this point in your life professionally, talk to us about what that is and what led you from that lemonade stand to what you do now.
sure. Yeah, and I can do that. And I'll talk, in broad terms,
Mm-hmm.
about the nature of what I do for people in the world. For those that are interested in understanding it better, I'll make sure
Mm-hmm.
my contact information is out there. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there's more than one way to make a living at this, right? I have a couple of models of deliverables, that creates, a solid revenue stream for me. But I I help people figure out. In business, most people think they need more connections, and they don't. They need better connections.
Mm.
And by better connections, I mean they need a stronger connection with strategic connections. Um, and I support people in both of those areas. What are your strategic connections, and then what does it mean to build a stronger connection with them? And strategic, I'll paint the picture more clearly. I'll give some examples that help people log on to that. But my whole life, I've always understood in business that the graphic designer and the billboard salesman should be going to lunch on a regular basis, because everybody that wants a billboard wants it to look good, right? And everybody that's got a new logo wants somewhere to put it, right? That the moving company and the divorce attorney probably have a lot of referrals for each other, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Right. That John Gates, the salary negotiation coach, and Amanda Valbert, the resume writing coach, should probably practically be in business together, right? Because everybody that talks to John is going to need Amanda or someone like Amanda, and everybody that talks to Amanda is going to need a John Gates or somebody like a John Gates, right? And so I've always seen those connections, and other people haven't, which always surprised me a little bit. So I started this journey on a career based on bringing those people together, which is successful and generates revenue for me and for them. And then over several years of doing that, I realized that people weren't maximizing that connection because they didn't know how to effectively build that relationship. They
Mm-hmm.
were stopping in most cases at marketing. Oh, you're a real estate agent, Alethea. I'm a mortgage lender. If you know anybody needs a good loan, give me a call. And I'm like, I don't know you well enough to refer you. yet. That's a bit
Hmm.
premature. Or they would go to the second step and build some degree of trust and referability, but then they'd stop short of getting into a consistent pattern of supporting each other with introductions, right? And um, the number of people I know, I ask people all the time, I'm a good networker, I don't need help with that. I said, and I bet you're not. Like, that's kind of bold. I said, I'll tell you what,
Hmm.
I have two questions for you, and then we'll know. Because the answers, the answers are the answers. You either are or you're not.
Hmm.
And they said, "Oh, fair enough." I said, okay, the first question is, what percentage of the adults that you know could refer you? Right? If you're a real estate agent, you're going to say, I don't know, 90, 95, 100%. You're going to say something like that because most adults are, I mean, most people over a lifetime are going to need a real estate agent at least a few times, right?
Yes.
If you've
Hmm.
got some sort of B2B business, right, you build websites for businesses, then maybe you'll say 50% of the adults that I know encounter other business people, right? If you're a niche, like the man that makes glow in the dark rope or the woman that's a professional mermaid, you may say
Uh-huh.
10%, right?
Uh-huh.
And those are real examples, by the way. But
Yes.
regardless, right? So the first number is not important. I don't care whether you said 10, 50, or 90. My next question is, of that number, what percentage actively refer business to you? And they always go, oh,
Mm.
because they're not. I spoke to a local businessman here not that long ago. I'll use his first name. He runs several businesses, and one is retail based, meaning marketing and advertising brings people to the
Hmm.
store and word of mouth. That's fine, but it's not a referral based business, and it shouldn't be because it's open to the public. It's a public facing business, and the other is some high level consulting and coaching work. And I said to Kevin, I will use his first name. I said, Kevin asked me what I was working on this several years ago. And I said, showing people how to get more referrals, quality referrals. And
Hmm.
he said, yeah, that's something more people should do. I said, yeah, what's the most referrals you've ever gotten from one customer or from one person, right? Because it doesn't have to be a customer. And Kevin said, well, I was just working on a spreadsheet on that the other day. So I actually know the answer. And I said, before you answer, Kevin, I would like to acknowledge that of all the people likely to utter the phrase, I was working on a spreadsheet of where my business came from the other day, you're number one, right? I said, I am not surprised those words came out of your mouth because he's very analytical. He said, one of my clients sent me two. No, wait. He said, you remember Neil that closed up his business? And I said, yeah. He said, he gave me his three best clients.
Wow.
So his high watermark was three. And I'm like, huh, from a guy that's not going to repeat the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning Neil's not going to sit out a non-compete, start another business, run it for a few years, close it again. And even if you did, that's three every 10 years. That's a
Hmm.
crummy ratio, right? You can't build your success on Neil shutting down his business every 10 years and giving you his three best clients, right?
Exactly.
So two was his repeatable high watermark. And three was, the most anybody had ever given him. And I'm like, that that's an insanely low number. It should
Hmm.
be in the dozens. There should be people that have given you an average of one quality referral a month for years at this point in your business. You're like, what? I'm like, it's not hard to, I don't use the manufacturer, but it's not hard to systematize the process where you find 6 to 10 people
Hmm.
that will give you a warm introduction, i.e., they will introduce you, not just give you a name on a piece of paper, introduce you to one ideal client profile per month. There's 6 to 10 people that should be producing on an average of 12 quality leads a year in your world. And I don't care what it is you do for a living, I can help you find those people. Unless it's a
Wow.
retail based business, And
Hmm.
and people don't know that's true because they go out and do what they call networking, or as I call it, networking, and they get an occasional hit and they think, they need to do more of that and they might get a few more occasional hits. It's like going to the casino and pulling on the slot machine handle, right? They keep you winning just often enough to make you think you're winning. But if you
Exactly.
stay there long enough, the loss of your time and your money will always net to the house,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so people do these low stakes networking and they get a hit just often enough. They get a referral or a prospect just often enough to make them think I should be doing more of this. I should be doing it slightly better. Slightly better than two is 2.2. A lot
Hmm.
better than two is four. That's
Hmm.
still a low number. There are 6 to 10 people that exist. I don't care what your business is, that will generate on average one referral a month. That's 72 to 120 a year. And once people get that, they're like, okay, now how do I create that?
And so, Daniel, in hearing this, and it's such a more effective way of networking, so as to speak,
Mhm.
because sometimes I've seen where people get caught up in how many people are in their connections on, say, LinkedIn. But out of those connections, it should be focused, in my opinion, quality over the quantity of it, because the
It-
quality is what's going to take you to heights and realms. And that's what I,
Downloads,
yeah.
followers, reach,
Hmm.
impressions, likes, those are ego numbers.
Exactly.
Ego. The only reason people pursue that is they're trying to make themselves feel good about themselves, period.
Hmm.
And whether or not that's healthy, whether that's a capital E ego that needs correcting or lowercase e ego,
Hmm.
we can argue all day long. There's only one number worth measuring: revenue.
That's
And
right.
there's
Oh,
only two
yeah.
numbers, and there's only two numbers that feed revenue. And it ain't followers, likes, and impressions. There's two numbers that
Hmm.
feed revenue. How many people are giving you money, and how many people are referring people to give you money?
Hmm.
That's it. So if you find that likes, impressions, and followers get you business, that's okay. But whether it's
Uh-huh.
100 and two give you money, or three and two give you money, it's the same thing. 100 means nothing next to the three. It's the two and the
Yeah.
two that we're comparing. I
I
mean, I
have
was
come across some people on LinkedIn that I've had calls with, or just warm introductions through others who, a few of them haven't even had 500 people on LinkedIn. Yet when I speak to them, they are literally millionaires, like liquid in assets and everything. And it's because of the quality connections, their marketing strategies, their business plan, all of that involved. And yet, if a person were only looking at their followers or their connections, they wouldn't think twice about them. And so it's very
correct.
ironic you would say that, in that it's truly quality over quantity. And so let's talk about your journey, because sometimes people can see you and just think, well, if he's got this all figured out, then he's always had it figured out. And so he's must have always had a high flying plane in business and
Not
never
by a
had a
long shot.
setback. So
Not by
talk
a
to
long
us
shot.
about that, because this is
Sure.
all of these years of experience, almost 40 years of entrepreneurial
Now you put it that way,
experience.
I feel old. But yes.
I had to
Okay.
emphasize that.
Sure.
Almost 40
Well,
years. I had to
and
emphasize that.
and
No,
and, and I'm
seriously though.
laughing. Right.
Yeah.
I'm
Mhm.
laughing because I firmly believe the best person to coach something is somebody that used to suck at it and now excels at it. Right.
Man,
If you look
yes.
at professional
Mhm.
sports, very few of the top rated players go on to become coaches. Because so somebody's a top rated player is almost always naturally gifted in some capacity. That doesn't mean they don't practice, but practice for them resulted in supernatural or better than average results. Almost none of them move on to become coaches because they don't know how to tell people how to go from not good to good. But the coaches were the people that topped out at B and B plus players in the pros and
Uh-huh.
become coaches, because those were the guys that weren't naturally gifted and got on the field in junior high as D players and figure
Hmm.
out how to make themselves B plus. So the best
Hmm.
coach is somebody that had to work their way up from, I'm not very good at this. And I'm back in my hometown of Columbia, South Carolina after a 13-year absence. And the first time I was in this town, I ran a very successful business. And I came back after a 13-year absence and started what I'm doing now 8 years ago. And as time went by, people were like, wait a minute, Daniel Andrews is coaching relationships? They're
Wow.
like, that's
Yeah.
not the guy I knew in the 90s. They're like, it's the same guy, but it's not the same guy, right?
Uh-huh.
It's Dan Andrews that you knew from the 90s. But yes, he's delivering this, and there was something that I learned, some things that I learned when I went into the B2B space,
Hmm.
because in my first career, I was selling business to consumer in a direct sales model,
Okay.
literally at the customer's house.
Hmm.
And the skills involved in that are very different than B2B and the trust
Hmm.
building that's required at that
Hmm.
level. And so the light bulb went on for me when I moved from here to St. Louis. I switched from B2C to B2B
Hmm.
sales, launched a business that I knew could be.
Also, you
Yeah,
all,
go ahead.
for people that might not know,
Sorry.
B2C, business to consumer, B2B, business to business. Okay.
I
Hmm.
apologize.
Okay. That's okay. Yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
I need
I
to
get
apologize
clarity.
because I scold people for using phrases that the audience might not know.
Yeah.
I said, it means something even not to others.
Hmm.
But,
Hmm.
trust it was, so it went from a one call close to sometimes, you had to meet with the business owner several times to get the decision that you needed to make things happen. And I failed at it the first time I launched it because I didn't understand everything, but also St. Louis is a weird town. I'm not going to go off on a rant, but St. Louis
Yeah.
is a weird town. If you're not from there, it's hard to do business, and that's all I'll say about it in a moment.
Interesting.
And that's
Hmm.
documentable. It wasn't a Dan Andrews problem. People know that to be a true statement. But anyway,
Hmm.
if anybody cares, I can dig into it with you, but you probably don't care. It's just a weird town. So I eventually figured out that if I wasn't local, it was going to be hard to do business. So I found a local, built some credibility with him. Was working in an adjacent industry, so he's perfectly
Hmm.
suited to be a referral partner. And we agreed that he would take me to do some deals with the people that he knew. And we
Hmm.
had made one visit, me, my wingman, the business owner, and the CFO, where I made my pitch for the value proposition, why we need to do the thing we need to do. So, great. We got to think about it, get back to us. So me and my wingman and the business owner got back together not long after that for a very short visit. We're standing on the parking lot of this guy's business. And the prospect, and the reason I won't use first names is not because they'll vouch for the story. I'll tell you their names, but their first names are so similar that I confuse myself when I tell the story. So
Oh,
wingman and prospect. So
okay.
the prospect points at me and says to the wingman, "Who is this guy?" And the wingman says, "He's my guy." And the prospect says, "But I don't know this guy." And the wingman says, "But I know this guy." And the prospect points at me and says, "Well, what happens if something happens to this guy?"
Hmm.
And the wingman said, "I'll find another guy." And that was a shift for me because in my previous business, when somebody said, "Who is this guy?" They said, "Dan, tell him. Do your song and dance. Tell him how great you are. Now's your chance to shine. Spotlight's on you." And Wingman refused to put the spotlight on me. The Wingman kept the spotlight on him.
Hmm.
Bert said, "Butch, it doesn't matter who this guy is. He's my guy. You and I already have a relationship. All you need to know is I have a relationship with Daniel. You don't need your own relationship with Daniel. I have a
Hmm.
relationship with Daniel. You have a relationship with me. That's all it takes. We got the deal, by the way."
Wow,
And
good.
and that was,
Right.
and I'm like, oh, I need more of those in my life. So that's when I started to look at how do you create those systematically.
Hmm.
And when I say systematically, I mean with purpose. Way too many people are doing what they call networking and they're speed prospecting or marketing by hand. And what I mean by that is they'll take a coffee meeting or a virtual coffee or a get to know you meeting, whatever they want to call it, usually something dismissive. I call mine something very different with anybody, hoping one of them will be a prospect or for a business. And I got to tell you, if you're a real estate agent in my hometown, don't spend any time convincing me you're a good real estate agent. I will not encounter, but at the most, a couple of people a year who might actually ask me, "Do I know a good real estate agent?" Because most people I know that might need one in any given year. Most of the people I know don't need one. Of the people that do need one, most of them know one that they know, like, and
Hmm.
trust. So the opportunity for me to refer is very slim. But if you're a real estate agent in this town, spend time with a mortgage lender, a divorce attorney, a funeral home director, a nursing home director, a moving company.
Hmm.
Those are all people that will have more people in a week to refer you to than I will in a year. And that's
Hmm.
what people fail to do. They'll spend their time with anybody, spreading the word to everybody, and that's called marketing by hand. You might as well have gone in the parking lot and flyered every car at the happy hour, then go inside and hand out a bunch of business cards, right?
Hmm.
But they'll spend time with anybody that'll give them the time. And it's two people hoping to God that the other one's a prospect and they'll actually sell something. Not a good use of your time.
It's so interesting how while we speak of this as entrepreneurs, I'm even thinking about how even more people who work a traditional 9 to 5 job and want to move up the ranks in their organization, I think that it's so important for them to be intentional about how they network as well and the connections that they make, because sometimes people who are working for organizations or companies might talk to everybody else, but aren't being strategic as to who they can even connect with. I'll give you an example. My sister, she's worked for the federal government for years, and she was trying for a long time to get to a certain level on um her job and what she does. And she was stuck for many, many years until she started seeking the mentorship and the guidance from people who were in positions of where she wanted to go, and started to ask the right questions. And once she started to do that and being very strategic about who she networked with, she got the promotion and she loves it now. And now she's getting calls from other agencies based on where she is now, all based on
Mhm.
how she shifted her networking. So
Who
for,
they're talking to and
yeah,
asking better questions. And
asking,
those
but
are
yeah,
the two places where
yeah.
people fail to make a distinction, right? I hosted a live event in this town. I don't know, it's
Mhm.
going on a year and a half ago now. I quit because there's so many live events in my town. I don't need to host them. There's plenty.
Mhm.
And these
Mhm.
two guys come in and they trade business cards, and and I'm talking to people over on this side of me, but these two guys are sitting on this side of me, and they spend 45 minutes talking about barbecue recipes, who's got the best, how do they smoke it themselves, blah 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 blah. And when it was over, I'm like, that's a terrible use of 45 minutes,
Mm.
because all they know now is I want that guy at my next barbecue, and I hope he invites me to his.
Uh-huh.
That's it. I said, which is
Yeah.
fine if you're looking for more barbecue friends, but I don't think that's why you came here today, right? I had a chance to take the microphone for a minute at a live event a couple months ago here in my town, and briefly introduce what I do. And several people walked up to me and they said, "What now?" When it was over, individually, I had the same
Yeah.
conversation 4 times, and I said, "I would propose to you that being here today, there's about a couple hundred people there, is a low value proposition." They said, "What do you mean?" I said, "If I asked you 6 months from now, how much business did you get from being here today?
Mhm.
You either won't know the answer or you won't like the answer." And all four of those people individually said, "You're correct. I either won't know the answer, most likely, or I won't like the answer, definitely." And
Mhm.
I said, then unless you're here for the free hot dogs and beer, why would you come here knowing that it's a low value
That's right.
engagement? Now, if you're an extrovert and this is how you get your social needs met, more power to you. But
Mhm.
don't
But
mistake this for a business exercise if you don't know how to make it a business exercise.
but in even thinking about your transformation as to how you knew that when you were in St. Louis, that wasn't the ideal spot for you to be, but
Mm-hmm.
yet when you shifted, came back home, revamped how you networked, how you started coaching, all of that. That's what really turned around your business. And I want to say something here as we start to come to a close. And I wrote this note down. You've said before to me and based about business, be true to yourself, go where you're celebrated and not tolerated. Share with us how very important that is in a person's growth, specifically in the life of an entrepreneur.
I, I think it's easy, and I get caught up in this myself, to
Hmm.
spend too much time trying to show people that they need to be thinking about things differently rather than going to places where people are already thinking differently about things. And now, I don't mean to imply that every entrepreneur is in a position to be super picky about who their clients are, right? And depending
Hmm.
on the nature of business, maybe marketing is the way to go. But if you're in professional services or anything that's B2B related,
Hmm.
highly likely that a network is going to do way more good for you than marketing. Um, I don't want to make a blanket statement until I know and understand somebody's business, but I would challenge anybody to give me a model of B2B or professional services where building a network doesn't make sense
Hmm.
over marketing. But I think it's here's an example. I host 3 different communities of business people, and they're very different in their flavor and who's to be in the room. And one I charge $2,100 a year for, and I don't do a lot of convincing because it's 2,100 bucks. So,
Mhm.
you kind of see it or you don't, right? But I go through a lot of people on the way to getting the people that see it. I've got one that I charge $5,000 a year for. Usually I have to do a little bit of convincing, a little bit of
Mhm.
math, a little bit of showing some people what's possible. I've got a room that I charge $25,000 a year to be in.
Mhm.
Zero convincing. As a matter of fact, the people that are actively giving me $5,000 a year are trying to convince me they belong in the $25,000 a year room at the $25,000 rate. They're
Oh.
actively trying to convince me they need to spend another 20K a year with me, which I'm not sure is true, to be
Mhm.
honest. Right. I find myself in a weird position trying to keep my 5K clients at 5K and not collect another 20K and move into the 25K room, which sounds like a weird thing to be doing, but I've got my reasons for that.
Mhm.
But the 25K room requires almost no salesmanship at all, no convincing at all. The fact that it exists makes people want to join it. And so not everybody's in a position to just throw out big numbers or change their rates that dramatically, right?
Mhm.
But the reality is that by using a bigger number, I'm sorting for people that get it, right? Versus people that have to be convinced.
Mhm.
And I think that's very interesting. So figure out how to sort for the people that get it or are closer to getting it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I would meet people that belong to weekly leads groups in my area, I used to invest a lot of upfront time, even if it was a short burst of energy, and explaining to them why it was a bad place to be. And I finally decided I'm going to stop that. I'm going to give my card and go, one day at your weekly leads group, you're going to look around the room and go, there has got to be a better way.
Mhm.
That's when I want you to call me. And
Mhm.
it has the effect of doing several things. Number one, it creates more interest than if I try to sell them because nobody likes to be sold unless they've given you permission to sell them, right? They don't want to hear that they've been making bad choices for years by
Mhm.
being a part of these weekly leads groups. Number one, it creates interest. Number two, it's way more authentic. Number three, it's way more effective, right? And it creates
Mhm.
a space for them to call me and go, yep, you're right. Today was the day. I was looking around the room and went, there's got to be a better way. I have no idea what it looks like, but you said you got a better way. What does that look like?
Mhm.
Rather than, you need to see it the way I see it, Fred. Give up what you've been doing. You know, it sucks. No, it actually doesn't suck. They get results or they wouldn't stay, but they could get better results with less effort. And
What?
so,
Mhm.
that's a subtlety, right?
Yeah.
If you ever look around the room and go, there's got to be a better way, that's when you call me.
Wow. There's got to be a better way. And thinking about your journey being, because everything you've said has been so loaded today and just valuable. Thinking about who you are now and how you
Hmm.
had to experience the setbacks and the growth and so much more in between. What is your philosophy when it comes to failures, and how have those failures played a role in who you are today?
I went into business with the wrong guy in
Mm,
my late 40s, coming out of my divorce. Somebody asked me to sponsor him in the trades. He said, give me a couple $1,000 to get started. We'll make some money here. My first clue should have been that his own family wouldn't stake him a couple of K to go into business. So I shouldn't have been involved in it.
mhm,
But I ended up going into debt over $38,000 and having to declare bankruptcy. By the way, here's a quick aside. The first $2,000 you steal from me is a referendum on your character. If I
mhm.
let you steal another 38,000 from me, that's a referendum on my intelligence, right? You share the blame for
Wow.
the first 2K, but if I let you steal another 38, that's
Mhm,
on me. Anyway, so several years after this, I was talking to my dad about that point of failure in my life. I benchmarked that as a point of failure. And he stopped me and said, son, there are no failures. Some lessons are just more expensive than others.
ooh, my goodness. Mm,
And, which wasn't the lesson I heard from him as a young man.
uh-huh.
but I'll take it, right? It was about 50 years too late, but I'll take it, right?
Mhm.
And he said that, and I said that has changed my perspective in so many ways. Meaning, number one, it's not a failure; it's a stepping stone. But it's a lesson if you'll learn the lesson.
Mhm.
Too many people want to bury their head, forget about it, pretend it didn't happen, blame it on somebody else. There's a lesson, right? Lessons probably,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And you have to draw the right lessons, right? The first is don't throw, in my case, don't throw good money after bad. When I realized he was a crook at 2K, I shouldn't have kept going, right? When I
Mhm.
realized we had integrity problems, right? My dad failed in business, and one of his lessons, and in his 40s, was don't do business with a man that wears a diamond on his pinky finger. That's the wrong
Ah.
lesson to draw, right? But in his mind, the guy was suspect because
Uh-huh.
that seemed like a mob,
Oh, yeah.
right? The media makes you
Exactly.
think that's a mob thing, and then the guy did turn out to be a crook. So in his mind, anybody, I'm like, that's not the right lesson, right? So make sure you're drawing the right lesson,
Exactly.
but it's not failure; it's a lesson
Thank
if
you.
you'll learn
Thank
the lesson, and
Yeah.
that's made a difference.
And I'm glad that you have exceeded all that you've lost and everything else. And it was an expensive lesson, but it was one that was needed even to get you to where you are. And if someone's listening right now, Daniel, and they would love to intentionally connect with you or learn more about how you can help them in this area, how can they contact you? And of course, I'll have info in the show notes as
Sure.
well.
I think the most personal thing you can offer somebody is your phone number. So 803-361-6825. My phone number is 803-361-6825. And just tell me, when you text, please include your names. I know who I'm talking to, and say, I heard you on Lethea Felton's, podcast,
Mhm.
right? And so I'll understand the context. And any question you want to ask, if you want to get on my calendar for 5 minutes, 15, 30, 45, just let me know what you need and I'll get you a calendar link and we can
And
talk about it.
And I really appreciate that. And in closing, as a final thought and a final question,
Mhm.
Daniel, in thinking about all that you do to help people, when you think of the word connection,
Mhm.
explain what that word means and how connections are pivotal in a person's own transformation in their life.
Well, there's several ways to look at it, right? To me, connection, I mean, of course, LinkedIn calls them your connections and they're just passing through, right?
Yeah.
So to have a true connection, right, is to elevate somebody, to the level of network or even,
Hmm.
deeper than that. But, I think authentic comes into play there. I
Hmm.
think connection has to do with letting people know you well enough that if you have a question or challenge or just somebody that you need to vent to, that you can afford to be authentic, right? That you've got a place where you can go where psychological safety exists and you can be authentic and it not catch them by surprise, right? Um, I think I think ideally you have to be strategic in your connections, right? Because again, you can waste a lot of time convincing people that aren't in a position to help you and you're not in a position to help. Right.
Hmm.
Again, if you're a real estate agent in my town, don't convince me you're good at real estate. I'm almost never going to have a referral for you. I'm as likely to have a referral for you if you're a real estate agent in San Diego as I am in Columbia, South Carolina. Right.
Hmm.
It's just a true statement. Right. And so, uh, and when I say authentic, right, and transparent, that doesn't mean you get to trauma dump or treat everybody like
That's
your
right.
therapist. But as you build those relationships over time, you'll have people that you can go to and say, "I've got my back to the wall here. Can you
Hmm.
help?" Right?
Hmm.
Where do you know of a resource that I could find? And
Hmm.
and that makes a world of difference. And somebody said, your network is your net worth. A
Hmm.
friend of mine tweaked that. He said, the net worth of your network is your net worth, which means be careful who you hang out with, right?
That's
I
right.
don't think you only need to look at the actual net worth values of people to judge whether or not they belong in your life, right? But make sure that you're being purposeful about who you hang out with, whether it's internally in business, whether it's socially and your structures there, whether it's entrepreneurial, trying to build more revenue and more referral partners,
Mhm.
but be intentional about who you're building with, because we don't have an unlimited amount of time.
No, we don't.
We don't have an unlimited amount of time. As I tell people, we spend this much time on the planet alive, right? This much awake, this much at work. These are approximations.
Hmm.
This much time dealing with other people. Why
Hmm.
wouldn't we select the people whose message we're qualified to amplify and who are qualified to amplify our message? When I
Hmm.
say amplify the message, I'm talking about strategically. Moving company,
Yeah.
divorce attorney can do a lot of good for each other. Real
Hmm.
estate agent, mortgage lender, sovereign negotiation coach, resume writing coach. They can do a lot of good for each other. So figure out who
Exactly.
those key people are and work
Yeah.
with them.
Yes, because those direct connections can help you to transform into levels, new heights, and places that you could not ever imagine. And so, thank you for emphasizing the authentic connection piece. And thank you for sharing with us a portion of your journey as to how you have gotten where you are now. And I thank you for even who you are in my life and how I've learned a lot from you in the time that we've known each other. And I am truly grateful that you have been a guest here on the Power Transformation Podcast.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Glad to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Power Transformation Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, and write a review. It helps us inspire even more listeners. And don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who could use a little power in their transformation. Until next time, keep bouncing back, keep rising, and be good to yourself and to others.